Doing it long enough that you remember those days, but it certainly has changed not only the paper form, but it's become more of a digital media now. The change for you with the Indianapolis Star.
Well, we have to communicate in a variety of different ways now. Obviously, Twitter and blogs and news stories and columns, and there's videos. You know, the Indianapolis Star is a media organization. I remember it wasn't too long ago that Racer was just a magazine. It came once a month. Now it's online. Now there are videos. Same thing with ESPN. It used to just be Sports Center at 6 o'clock and then 11 o'clock, but now they have a radio network and they have the .com world, and even NBC. You know, that used to just be a Peacock. Now it's NBC Sports Network and the .com. They have newspaper writers, former newspaper writers covering things. ABC the same way. So we've all had to adapt. We've all had to find a way to reach our consumers however they want their news. If they want it at 2 o'clock in the morning, we got an option for them. If they want it on their doorstep the next morning, we do it that way. Or if they want to watch television, television has provided similar type of options for people to consume when they want to, as opposed to when we want to give it to them.
Did you have to reinvent yourself as a reporter with the change in the way the news is delivered, how it's transmitted?
Not really. I think we're all communicators. It's just, are we writing 140 characters? Are we writing a blog that takes a little bit of opinion and length? Are we writing a news story? It's just doing it differently. I wouldn't call it reinventing. I'd say it's just multitasking and communicating in different forms.
You had to learn how to talk in front of the television.
That's true.
We're content providers these days, I would call us.
How has it changed for you? You were on the PR side. You then on ESPN.com. You've done a little bit of everything in the industry as a reporter now. Have you found the transition, is it difficult? Is it easy? Do you have the worlds ever collide together?
I think that in an ideal world, PR and journalism work together hand in hand. It doesn't always work that way in the real world. I set out to be a journalist. People say, oh, you were a PR man. Well, maybe I got famous for being a PR man for Pac West Racing for 2 years in 97 and 98. I actually got my start in PR with the Speedway. It's a little known fact that I had a $1,200 internship for the month of May 1993. A lot of it courtesy of this man right here who got me the recommendation to get in there. But I always wanted to be a journalist. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to write about auto racing. I didn't have a big love affair with newspapers like some people do. I was always a magazine guy. But so for me, the big change mentally was to adapt from being a magazine writer or a print writer to being an internet writer. The biggest break that I got was when I got back into the press in 1999, was covering the kart series for National Speed Sport News. I wasn't going to make a living covering racing for National Speed Sport News, no disrespect to that publication. But the big break was the internet and the fact that it changed from print content primarily to online content. At the time, Curt hired a company called Quokka, and Quokka, to cover the kart series, hired journalists. They hired Robin, they hired myself, they hired David Phillips and Gordon Kirby, the so-called Gang of Four. And it was great. I mean, we were, you had to kind of think who your client was, but at the same time, we were told to write real journalistic stories and not, suck up to the bosses. So the change to the internet was the big thing for me. And as far as PR, I really enjoyed the 2 years that I did it. I enjoyed a lot more thinking back on it now than I did at the time. It was kind of drudgery for me at the time, but it was a tremendous experience. The biggest lesson I learned is that it's a people business. I made so many more contacts. I had so much more visibility as a PR man for a race-winning team than I did as a third-rate journalist from 93 to 96. And so it helped me step back into the media side at a higher level. And now, I mean, to me, the issue is this sometimes adversarial relationship between the PR and the journalist side. To me, a good PR person facilitates getting their driver, getting their team into the papers. They promote their driver, they don't protect their driver. A lot of the PR people these days, they seem to think their job is to be a gatekeeper, to keep the media away from their people. There are PR people out there that get upset with me because I have the temerity to call their driver directly. If I've known a guy for 15 years, I'm going to call the guy directly and not go through some gatekeeper.
Do you feel, coming from that world of PR, that it's a situation where teams don't take the time to develop public relations and PR people anymore? How did you learn the trade, and why has it changed in your opinion?
I learned it very much on the job. There was a book that was produced about the 1997 Pac West season by a gentleman called Paul Haney. And I read that in the middle of 1998 and learned that I about lost my job 2 races into the 97 season. So I came into it from a journalistic standpoint, and it was from wanting to be a journalist that I kind of developed my philosophy for being a PR person. I tried to take care of the media. If somebody needed something, I tried to help them out. And I wonder if that goes on so much these days. There's a whole new generation of PR people that seem more concerned with doing their own tweets than getting their driver or their team in what we old timers consider legitimate media.
Cavin, you made the transition from the IndyCar Radio Network over to the NBC Sports Network, so from radio to television. Was that a difficult transition for you? In other words, when you're on the radio, you have to paint a picture with your words, where television, that doesn't necessarily need to be the case.
I think it's very similar, and I spent several years trying to convince TV executives that if you could do radio, you could do TV, and it took a while to find somebody that bought my line. But if you can be a pit reporter on radio, it's very much the same. The differences would be, obviously, every once in a while you have to memorize what you're going to say, but you're really not on camera that much other than when you're doing interviews. And an interview on TV is very similar to one on radio. The other big difference is one thing we don't have the ability to do on radio is really tell stories, because you have to describe what's happening on the track. In TV, we can multitask and we can tell a story while you're still watching the action on the track, so you have to actually do more reporting. Radio was more reacting, more play-by-play, more finding out what's going on, because that's all you had time to do. In TV, you're expected, when they show a car, for those that don't know, basically pit road is split up. If there are 3 pit reporters, you have 1/3 of the cars. So one reporter has the first 8, the next one has the next 8, and then so on. So if your car comes on screen, the producer in your ear may say, "Do you have something on Scott Dixon?" And you better say yes. And then you, if they want you to, tell a story and still watch what's going on. The other challenging part, and Vince can, I think, attest to this, is the through the field. That was the hardest part, and it took me a little while to remember that I've got this little camera, and I wish I could bring this guy home with me when I'm out in the yard, somebody carrying a camera around, the monitor that's showing me what's going on, and I would forget to watch it. In radio, when you call a pit stop, as you know, you've got to get out there and see it, where in TV, it took me about a year to realize I don't have to run back and forth. I can just look at this monitor and describe what's going on. So the same kind of thing with through the field. You have to be organized, you have to have notes, and you're just running through. If you have 3 or 4 cars in a row, you've got to have something very succinct to say about each one of those cars and try to keep track of what's going on. But it's the same.
Yeah, I also find interesting the difference between the radio and watching you do pit reporting on television. It's not as time sensitive. And I guess for radio, it doesn't necessarily need to be the same as well, but they can always come back to you where you can hold a story and it doesn't need to be reported right away, because there's always that element of video to match what's going on with the play-by-play call.
Exactly. You can go back and revisit it, and we try to tell all of the stories. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things that don't get on the air. We'd like to be able to give the story of every driver, every race, but sometimes the guy that's been running 18th all race, when he loses an engine, maybe it doesn't get on. We try to at least get it mentioned, but yeah, you can go back and revisit things, and I think our producers are the key behind that. I'm sure that feels the same way about the ESPN, ABC people, but they're really good about following the storylines of the race and making sure we get as much in as we can.
Vince, we'll go to you now. We'll have Cavin hand you the microphone with. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one thing that I think is great about the involvement of media today, and as Curt and John and Robin have talked about a little bit from the print side, and Cavin addressed it somewhat, that in a race, it's not just the top 4 or 5 that are having a successful day. If you've been around racing long enough, you know that in a field of 25 sprint cars, the guy who runs 15th could have had a good day, considering what he came to the track with, or regardless of what kind of racing you're involved in, there are so many good stories to tell. It's not just the guys who are finishing 4th or 5th or, you know, having a great day and the headlines are about them. And I think that's one of the great things about the involvement of media today, and that you can write a lot more, whether it's blogs or columns or whatever the case may be, and you can tell some better stories because there's more of an outlet for it on the internet than there used to be, when you could just write a column for the paper or one article for the magazine. Now with the internet and the various outlets that writers have, you can write so much more and therefore tell so many good stories that a lot of times on a race telecast, that's one of the things that we always try to pitch our producers, is that just because the guy's running 13th or 14th doesn't mean that he's having a bad day. They may be having a great day, and we'd like to tell those stories more. Sometimes that's a challenge to get everyone to buy into that concept, but I think if you come from a racing background, which all of the people up here do, you better understand the fact that a guy could be running 15th but still having a great day. Whereas if you don't come from a racing background, maybe you just come from a TV background or a radio background, you don't quite get that. And I think that's one of the things that I love about the internet, is the depth of stories that we are able to read today. And I do that as a fan, not just as a journalist, but as a fan, to be able to read so much more good material that guys like these three on the end write is, I think, one of the great things about where media has gone today.
When you do pit reporting on television, specifically for the Verizon IndyCar series, there are so many personalities out there. You're limited to the time you can spend with those drivers. As a reporter, obviously you're there to ask a question and tell a story, but do you also try to enhance some of that personality to help the entertainment portion of the television broadcast? Is that possible?
Well, I think during the course of a broadcast, and Kevin, talked about, what we can add as pit reporters. An IndyCar pit stop may last, 6 seconds. So there's not a lot of information to get in 6 seconds, and a lot of times you can debate it whether or not the pit reporter should even handle an IndyCar pit stop. One of the things I've enjoyed about broadcasting as many NASCAR races, the pit stops are twice as long. You can actually give more information about why what they're addressing on the car, what changes they're making. So what I like about on an IndyCar broadcast, regardless of what broadcast we're doing, but having an opportunity to tell a story wrapped around a nugget of information about what that driver is dealing with. If the driver is struggling with his car for whatever reason, you can report the fact that they are struggling with the handling of their car. Elio's struggling with the handling of their car, but you can also wrap a story around the fact that, maybe it's something they've struggled with all weekend. Maybe they found out just before they rolled it out that they had an issue. Maybe, maybe the engineer's been sick all weekend long and now they finally got him back, but you can make it whatever it is, but it gives you an opportunity to tell some story, tell some personality, identify some personality, not just with the driver, but with the crew chief or the engineer, the chief mechanic, the guy who's handling the strategy. I mean, the racing is so much more than just the guy behind the wheel, and that's what I like to get across to the viewer, to make sure they understand that it really is a team sport and not just about that one guy behind the wheel.
I'll open this to everybody. With the advent of Twitter, you have the ability to get anything that's on your noggin out right now, which also means you can disseminate information instantaneously. Although you all have worked together and have been doing journalism for a long time, has it become so tempting now to be the first to report a story that sometime you get caught out by that? Do you have to weigh the fact that, yeah, I think this is good, and you want to be the first to do it without knowing for sure? Or is that still the case? You have to know for sure before you report a driver or announcement or something of that nature?
That's what the internet's done. The internet, everybody's a reporter, everybody wants to break a story, or everybody's an expert. But there's no real, I don't get on Twitter because I've been fired from enough goddamn jobs. I don't need to get fired from another one. But Curt, he's on it all the time, but he's been a newspaper guy. when you put something out there, you can, I guess Twitter, you can probably say, hey, don't be surprised if so-and-so shows up in this car. Like we've all been talking about Sage Karam for the last couple of months. We're pretty sure he's going to get Ganassi's 4th car. They just don't have all the money done yet, so they didn't announce it this week. But so everybody wants to know, you know, and it's instant gratification. What are you going to tell us? Whereas Twitter, I mean, people, did you see what these people said on Twitter? And then they take it down the next day because it was either erroneous or somebody got mad at them or whatever. I still, you know, I'm an old man, so I got the old school thing where you can, it's a little more freedom on maybe on ESPN.com and then Curt's got at the Star, but like at Racer.com, you know, they trust me. You know, I wrote a story that said Will Power was going to Roger Penske, the best I could deduce, and, you know, nobody said, you know, if it didn't happen, you know, you're going to get fired. It's just that we've all been doing this long enough to know when there are a few people in IndyCar shows that still tell the truth. Not many, some. And we've identified most of them. And so you figure they're not all lying to you every time they tell you something. And, you know, Ganassi's one of the great liars of all time, but he's not a very good liar, so sometimes he traps himself.
I think I would say that 2 things. One, we have to remember that we represent our brands, whether that's individually or the company that we work for. And people come to us, all of us, because they respect our experience or they respect the effort that we've put in over the years and that we're close to things. Are we always right with things? No. Are we beaten sometimes by a fan in Nashville who saw a trailer go by down the road? Sometimes that's going to happen. But I think people will come to any of the 5 of us because they trust that over time we're going to give them something useful.
A couple thoughts. First of all, I like to quote Jim Rome, Twitter is a loaded gun. I've made that mistake. I've said, you know, oh, so-and-so is going to be the new CEO of IndyCar. Wrong. You know, you feel like an idiot, but that's a small mistake in the overall world of Twitter mistakes that have gone out there. The other thing is that the immediacy of it all. When I worked PR for Pac West Racing, Bruce McCaw, the team owner, said, get a point and shoot camera and carry it with you everywhere. And I didn't do too much of it. I mean, I did. But now, everybody, I'll bet you 98% of the people I'm looking at right now are carrying a point and shoot camera with them. And to me, you know, Curt's been more active on Twitter, I think, than any of us. But I'm more expressive with the immediate internet through photos more than anything. You know, whether it's a picture. I've got a picture in here in my phone that I took of Dan Weldon and Dario Franchitti after the 2011 Indy 500. And that's the kind of thing, if you get a picture like that out there, the immediacy of it, it can have a huge impact.
Vince?
I was just going to say, I think in regards to social media and Twitter, and I'm not a big believer in breaking stories via Twitter. That's not really what I do per se. Twitter, I would agree, in the loaded gun. You know, it can identify idiots pretty quickly. But I would also say, and echo what Curt said, in that if you read something that one of us put out, and I think you can identify it if you follow our business enough, or as fans you follow the sport enough, it's pretty quickly you can identify the people that you can trust with something that they put out. Everyone is going to make a mistake occasionally. There are, you know, every one of us has been told something by someone we trust in a high position, and it's turned out to not be true. They were maybe telling us, you know, Robin mentioned a name or two. You know, maybe they're trying to get you off the trail. You know, many times I've had a discussion with people in that regard to say, you know, just tell me you can't tell me, but don't lie to me. Because if you lie to me and I take your word for it and I go out and I present something, then that makes me look bad. I don't ever trust you again. That creates a whole lot of different issues. So, you know, there's a lot of bad about Twitter and social media, but there's good about it as well. I just took a picture of the people a little bit ago, the people that are standing out here, and promoted the fact that we're at the PRI show doing a media panel. Well, you know, since then, 6 people have retweeted it. Maybe some of those are people here, maybe they're people all over the world or wherever. You know, that's exposure that we don't often get. This event might not get, this particular panel might not get. So there's some good things about it. And it's like anything in life in general. If you use it the right way, it can be a tool of an advantage. If you use it the wrong way, it can identify the idiots pretty quickly, and part of that's humor, part of it's flat out mean. There's things I read on Twitter that I'm embarrassed for the people that tweeted them. I think it's, unless you're a parody of some sort, and there's some really good parodies out there.
Fake Robin Miller, everyone.
Yeah.
Fake Robin Miller.
But